But it's in our own hands. It's in our own hands how far we're governed by fear. As I've said, we can't all be sacked. That's impossible. And if enough people will stand up for something, as has happened with the backlash against the trans stuff, enough people had said, hang on, enough is enough. If enough people take a stand, then at the very least, there is safety in numbers.
Anne Widdecombe, what a privilege it is to talk to you. It's an absolute joy to speak to you again. If anybody doesn't know you, of course, you have been a government minister. You've been prolific in the media very recently, and ever since your beginning of your political career, you've written so much, you've spoken so much, and also you've been a stalwart supporter of man-woman marriage. And so it's a privilege to have you on the show today. Could you just begin by saying hi to our viewers and our listeners?
Yes, hello to everybody who's listening, and I hope you're having a good day.
Well, it's lovely to talk to you. Now, we recently saw the 10th anniversary, if you like, of the first same-sex marriage in the UK. And right back at the beginning, I wasn't involved, but you were deeply involved in the campaign to keep marriage as the thing which describes what a man and a woman can do. Now, let's readily admit that at the time we had civil partnerships in the UK which gave equal rights to other types of unions. And so that was there already. And we said, or you said, and the campaigning group that formed itself into the Coalition for Marriage said, actually, we need to preserve marriage as the definition of the thing that only one man and one woman can do. And it's important. And if we lose that, there'll be various consequences. Now, you and many others gave lots of speeches and you made some predictions. And I just wondered if we could go through some of those today, those predictions that you made, and also what's actually happened as a result. And the first of those was, look, if you redefine marriage, what marriage is, support for marriage will reduce and fewer people will get married. What are the consequences that have arisen from that statement?
Well, I mean, it's perfectly true now that marriage is becoming a minority occupation in this country. Now, you can't attribute all of that to gay marriage. I mean, that's obviously a nonsense. Marriage was already declining. Respect for marriage, the feeling that it was necessary to be married in order to have children, all that was already declining. I think what gay marriage did was act as a catalyst.
And quite clearly, I think that's one of our future points. We know that most people in the UK, for the first time in history, are unmarried, that most births take place outside of marriage, that cohabitation is up. And I suppose one of the things is that looking into one of our future points about education, of course, a lot of teachers, when I go up and down the country, and say to me, we're told not to talk about marriage and long-term relationships. And so kids are growing up not knowing about these things and not knowing about the benefits of these things, which again contributes, as you say, to things happening. Another prediction was that, well, if you redefine it once, further redefinitions will surely come in no time at all.
Yes, the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, he was the former Archbishop, George Carey, he said that one should redefine marriage once should just dispense with a definition that was recognised across the globe, that had stood the test of centuries. He said once you do it once, you can do it again. So if you redefine marriage to say, well, it can be between two people of the same sex, then why not, he said, redefine it again so that it can be between, say, one man and two women, or one woman and two men, or a whole harem. Why not just keep redefining?
And we've seen no-fault divorce. So we've taken gender out of marriage. The fact that a woman is necessary or a man, that's no longer the case. We've got no-fault divorce, which has removed the permanency of marriage. So really, grabbing at the roots, and no-fault divorce, abolishing the idea of, adultery effectively, in that it's no longer a cause for the cessation of a marriage. And in fact, when marriage was redefined, because of the difficulty of defining sex acts, you then again remove that concept as a fault. We've got Labour promising a common law marriage policy. We've got increased polygamy. or desires in the media, and some legislators saying actually we need to legalize polygamy, because why should it be restricted to one man and another man, or just two people? You know, if you're going to redefine it, why restrict it at all?
Well, I mean, all that is quite true. But what has particularly appalled me is the redefinition of parenthood. Now, when I spoke at the Conservative Party fringe meeting in 2012, when we were campaigning against what was then the advent of gay marriage, we already had civil partnerships. And I actually mocked and thought that I was being perhaps a bit too sarcastic at the time, and said, well, what are we going to call parents? Are they going to be progenitor A and progenitor B, yep. which was a suggestion at the time. Now, of course, that hasn't taken on. But what definitely is now happening is that because of the trans lobby, we're now being told to say not mothers, but, birthing partners or whatever it might be. And to sort of not suggest, for example, that a man can't menstruate when quite obviously he can't. And the trans lobby has given a whole new impetus to, just, if you like, negating the normal understanding of parenthood. You have mums and you have dads, and you should be able to say so.
And that was another prediction at the time, that it would lead to the eradication of sex-based terms and language. And we know, just looking, you've got the concept of birthing parents and all sorts of really strange phrases now, which are being added to legislation as well as in practice throughout the NHS and all sorts of other public body organisations. So once you remove the sex-based requirements of marriage, you then, of course, remove and confuse the issue of gender more generally.
I thought that I was being sarcastic, but it's actually come to fruition on a much larger scale than I ever anticipated.
Absolutely right.
And I pointed out in that speech that there are thousands of references in statute to mothers and fathers and to mothers and fathers, and that gradually that would be eroded, and so it has come to pass.
And then, of course, there's the sensitive issue of surrogacy, where, with marriage comes a right to parenting. Well, some people, or some couples can't make children by definition. And so you then have this, well, of course, how do we facilitate them? Well, you then establish a market for children, and the idea of a child's right to grow up with its biological mother and father is replaced by adults' desires to have children in their relationships.
Well, I think the crucial thing there is when you talk about adult desires. I mean, obviously, down the ages, children who have been adopted or children who have been fostered have grown up with parents that were not their natural parents, and that is perfectly okay, and we all applaud that. But what is now happening is that people, and indeed has been happening for some years, is that people are regarding children as a right. Yeah. As an absolute right. Yeah. Well, it's not. It's a gift from God. It's not a right, to be achieved at all costs. And it does concern me when a child is brought into the world quite deliberately fatherless or motherless. Now, that's going to happen to children in the normal course of events through death or divorce or whatever it might be. But to actually design right from the outset a child who does not have a father or who does not have a mother, I think is profoundly wrong.
Absolutely. But the people we expect to stick up for this, of course, would be the church. However, you predicted quite well all the way back then that this would cause a crisis in the Church of England. As I recall, I think you left the Church of England because of ordination of women. Well, if you hadn't done then, you would have done at a later point, because tell us a little bit about the resulting crisis in the Church of England, which was predicted well beforehand.
Well, there is, of course, a massive split in the Church of England over whether or not priests should conduct gay marriages or even bless gay marriages. And that split is deepening. And of course, the Church of England has been doing what the Church of England always does, which is muddling through. and not actually coming down on one side or another, but sort of leaving it to priest's choice or whatever. But the law at the time specifically introduced a quadruple lock that would protect the church. Only the church can give up that lock. And I'm afraid the noise is coming now out of the Church of England hierarchy is that probably in the not too distant future that will happen.
There were protections fought for at the time for clergy, such that nobody could be compelled to partake in same-sex marriages if they didn't want to. But we're finding now, I think there was a cross-party private members bill proposed by Bren Bradshaw and others, the idea that, well, clergy who refuse should not, should be taken to court or cease to be clergy. So again, the pressure's on to say, well, actually, you can't refuse. You've got to do it. And we've got other sorts of language, police coming along, the idea of a banning of so-called conversion therapy, saying, well, actually, if you disagree, if you say it's wrong, you're committing subliminal coercive conversion therapy, and you're not allowed to do that. And in fact, we want to make that sort of thing illegal.
Well, of course, it's not only priests who are having their consciences overridden, not at all. In that speech that I've already referred to, I listed a whole lot of occupations which I thought were going to be very adversely affected, and that people would not be able to take part in them. And for example, I said guest house owners, printers, website designers, teachers, housing officials, registrars, NHS chaplains, adoption workers, foster carers. I never thought of bakers. But of course, we've even had that with Ash's Bakery. I never thought of that at the time. So your point about the clergy is well made, but they are at the moment at least protected by the quadruple lock. Other professions are not protected.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I was speaking, in fact, a few days ago to a Church of England chaplain in a Church of England school who dared to say to Church of England pupils that you can believe the Church of England doctrine around marriage if you want to. And for saying that, he was fired and reported to an anti-terror organisation. So you're absolutely right. It beggars belief, the sorts of things that are happening as a consequence. And there's a little bit of a conflict, isn't there, in equality law? Because you've got these conflicting equalities now.
It's worth pointing out that the courts have always stood up for the right of the individual and have said that in a democratic society, a view that marriage is between one man and one woman is worthy of respect. They've said that, and they've continually found in favour of people who've been dismissed because of that. But of course, there is a difference between being dismissed and being hired in the first place.
There's always another reason why you might have lost your job, for example. And even then, I've spoken to lots of teachers who have either lost their job or have been cowed into silence. And even heads, for example, who think, well, I don't want this to... I'm coming on to the education in a minute, but heads who will say, I don't want this to dominate my curriculum. But they get a telephone call saying... from a particular group saying, do you want us to come in and teach your lessons on these subjects, or are you a homophobe? And they know what that means. You will lose your job as a head because we will make it public that you don't want us, and that means you're homophobic, and therefore we'll make a fuss to the parents and to your governors, and it won't be long before you're removed. I think it was October 2018, Comres anonymous survey among MPs, and of over half of those who responded, they said they were too fearful to express their real views on these issues, and presumably then too fearful to vote in accordance with their conscience. And this is our lawmakers. Of course they're populists because they have to be voted into office. But if they're too afraid, and we've seen it recently with other issues, where MPs cower at external threats, and they're only human.
And yet lawmakers, as I pointed out again in that same speech, our lawmakers are free to express their opinions in a way that those that they actually govern are not. I could always say what I thought in the House of Commons, and I was absolutely protected by parliamentary privilege.
But I suppose what happens in the local constituencies, there are repercussions, pressure groups, and often you'll find that the most vociferous people that make the most noise are kind of minority groups and the Joe public who just wants to get on with their lives, they generally don't make a fuss.
Well, you should stand up to them. There's no excuse.
And we do find, back on the prediction that people who, organizations and people who follow these things will face persecution. Well, it wasn't that long ago that Franklin Graham, the son of the famous Billy, of course, came to Wales, where in fact I live. And the First Minister at the time, and we reported this at the time, said he wished he could ban Franklin Graham from entering the country simply because of his beliefs around same-sex marriage, etc. And indeed, I think there were some legal cases resulting on venues saying we refuse to let you use our venue because of your religious beliefs.
I know Sheffield refused because of his attitude towards gay marriage. I said, when he won those cases, I said that those councillors who voted to ban him should have been surcharged.
And you also, back in the day, you referred to schools being forced to teach certain things, and that has indeed come to fruition now. We know that up and down the land in England, in Scotland, in Wales, that schools are required now by guidance to teach all manner of things that maybe parents wouldn't want their teachers teaching them, but they're required at law. We've got examples of Ofsted going into Jewish schools and making sure that Jewish girls have got the right understanding about alternative family arrangements, etc., etc. And even, dare I say, in Wales, the right to remove children from certain parts of the curriculum has been withdrawn. So as a parent, the state will teach your 3 or 4 year old you can be born in the wrong body if they want to, and you have no right to withdraw them from that.
So what have we got a government for? What have we got a government from? It's government which sets the policy. It's government which, guides Ofsted. So government is responsible for this, and government has to decide what to do about it. And if the answer is that it will do nothing about it, then that effectively is saying that it agrees with this. There has been a backlash against the trans invasion of our schools. There's been a real backlash against that. That may be a start.
Yeah, it may be a start. You're quite right. But and there are some, it feeds into the whole freedom of expression worry that you and others expressed at the time, that people's ability to freely express their beliefs would be curtailed. And we do find that when people like Felix and Gole, when who was it, the MacArthurs with the cake thing, and when people do stand up, they're generally vindicated in the courts if it's purely a religious based or a free speech issue. But of course, a lot of people aren't able to take the hassle that comes with being dragged through a court because of, a lot of people will just fall over straight away, not to get sacked, or will end up getting sacked and languish in despair, or otherwise will dare not open their mouths because of the chilling effect of organisations individuals in which suffer no consequences when these things happen.
When it comes to, you say, dare not open their mouths, yes, they can. Yes, they can. And if enough of them do, you can't sack every teacher in the country. I always say that if the early church had shown the same sort of energy that we get now, we'd all still be worshipping Zeus. You have to say what you believe.
Yeah, and I suppose, to round up, Anne, the whole kind of live and let live, the whole kind of liberal ideology doesn't seem to have, the classical liberal ideology now doesn't seem to have, and you've got interesting cases of lots of people talking about the Christian moral framework being good for society now who aren't Christians but can realise that actually when there's no objective moral framework, all sorts of subjective frameworks jump in. Classical liberalism doesn't. It gets quashed. So I'm wondering, what's the way forward now? How do we recover truth so people who know the evidence around man-woman marriage is great, and we need to encourage it because it's good for men, it's good for women, it's great for children, and it's fantastic for society, the whole of society, including people that don't want to do it. How do we get back to a position where we respect the truth of being able to promote what's right and good and healthy more widely without fear?
Well, it's in our own hands. It's in our own hands how far we're governed by fear. As I've said, we can't all be sacked. That's impossible. And if enough people will stand up for something, as has happened with the backlash against the trans stuff, enough people had said, hang on, enough is enough. If enough people take a stand, then at the very least, there is safety in numbers.
And oddly enough, that's the thing which leads to kind of the best ability of everyone to live the freest lives they want to in society. It's when we start restricting people's ability to say what's on their mind, and that just speech becomes definitive hate instead of just your opinion, etc., etc. That actually leads away from liberalism and into kind of totalitarianism. And we need people to wake up and see that actually allowing people to speak their minds and have their own views and have their own thoughts and even challenge each other's views and thoughts, because that's how you improve as a culture, is by actually holding each other's views and thoughts up to scrutiny, not ignoring data and evidence, but holding it up to scrutiny. And we just need to get back to a position where we can do that openly, objectively, calmly, fairly, respectfully, decently, and identify what's good.
It's in our own hands, as I've said.
Listen, Anne, you are actually doing that on a daily basis. It's a real privilege to talk to you. I'm so grateful for your time, for everything you're doing. Look forward to speaking to you again sometime. But for now, Anne Widdecombe, what a privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.